Okay, let's get started. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you all for coming on a very beautiful spring day. I know it must be hard to be inside. And today is the last seminar of this semester, so thank you all again for coming. This is for, I think I see many familiar faces, but for those of you who are new, 1 minute background on this series is this is organized by the Department of ECE. The ideas came from the Department of Physics. We are very good at borrowing or copying good ideas, and in that spirit, we started the same thing that physics folks were doing very, very well. The idea is to have at least one seminar a month. So please go to the physics seminar series that happens in the fall. And we will come back again in 2019 spring. Wow, that seems so far away. So I'm sure you're not here to see me. So let me introduce my colleague and dear friend, Romit Roy Choudhury. Romit is one of our own. He graduated from CS or ECE CS in 2006. And he went to Duke, where he did many, many great things, and we wanted him back, and we are fortunate to have him back here for almost 5 years now. He works on many different things, but as you'll see today, one of the things that I would like to mention to you is he works on mobile computing. So that covers, I would say, 60–70% of all of computer engineering. So if you want to know more specifics, obviously he's going to share that with you. His students, I may always try to give credit to one's students. His students do amazing things. They won many, many awards. And one thing that I would like to point out is Romit was awarded SIG Mobile Rockstar Award. So with that and no further ado, please welcome Romit.
Thank you, Pawan. Thank you very much. I have 140 slides for a 60-minute talk, so I don't want to spend too much time telling you about how excited I am, but I just want to say this. I've given talks to sizable audiences like this, but never have I had an audience who have come voluntarily, where they did not have to come on a sunny, beautiful spring morning like this. So I really appreciate your time for coming. I hope I make this hour worthwhile. Okay. With that, let me get started with my first of 140 slides. I want to talk to you about a bunch of things today. The title is Smartphones, Smart Homes, and Smart Cities, a Typical Day in 2030. There's a famous saying that says, that starts like this, that says, predicting the future is actually easy. It's getting it right which is hard. And this is not surprising. In fact, lots of scientists have even tried to predict the future. I think it was T.J. Watson, who was one of the fathers of IBM, who said, there is at most demand for 8 computers in the world. And I think Bill Gates said that who is going to buy a computer for doing things at home? There is no way this is going to succeed. Clearly, these predictions have been badly wrong. And this is not surprising why these predictions go wrong, because what sticks in the long run in terms of technology is a function of so many trends, right? Scientific trends, economic trends, socio-political trends, right? So all these trends, it's very hard to predict what's going to happen, right? For me, what's perhaps more worthwhile is perhaps to sample various ideas that's incubating across different research labs in the world, and then come back home and kind of ponder how these ideas could or may eventually interweave with each other to enable what we think of the future of technology. Okay? So in that sense, what we're going to do today is essentially kind of look at different Lego blocks, if you will, which are getting developed in various labs in different research universities, in different startups, and even some industries. And then imagine ourselves how these Lego blocks can come together to enable different kinds of future applications, technologies, services. But we're mostly going to focus on this, and I'll leave your imagination to make the translation from the left to the right, from your left to your right. Okay? But of course, there are many, 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 many Lego blocks, right? In many, many research areas. I do not know 95% of them. I'm not an expert in any of them. The small sliver of ideas and things that I work with, I could potentially talk about those. So today we have time and expertise to only talk about a few of these. And the few of these would be broadly in the areas of wireless networking and mobile computing. That's the area of research in which what burns my midnight oil. And even that is pretty broad. I'm going to focus even more on things around smartphones, smart homes, and smart cities. Okay? So just to give you a roadmap of various things we are going to talk about, we may not have time to go deep into any of these, but this is kind of a high-level wine tasting, if you will, where you kind of get a sense of what are some of the ideas that are incubating in different parts of the world. And we'll talk about indoor localization, wireless health monitoring, inaudible acoustics, vibratory communication, battery-free networks, robotic networks, so on and so forth. Okay? At any point in time, if you have questions, please feel free to interrupt me. I definitely want this to be a two-way exchange. So absolutely don't feel shy. Even kids, if you don't understand something, raise your hands. I'm very happy to repeat it in a different way so that it's more accessible. Okay? But overall, we are going to stay at the very high level, so things should be understandable. Let's begin with indoor localization. Okay? You know, GPS has been one of the very popular technologies all over the world. Today, I think it touches every one of our lives. You have this in your car. You have this on your phone. You have this on these watches. You're using them to find out what are restaurants around you for navigation, so on and so forth. Turns out, GPS works only for outdoor environments. Okay? You've never seen, I believe, if you have, let me know, where you're in an airport and you say, I want to go to terminal 33. You put in on your phone terminal 33 and tells you, take a right at the next corridor or at some place. It does not guide you through the indoor environments the way GPS does for outdoor environments. Okay? So before we go further, let's kind of get a quick look at what GPS does. There are a whole bunch of satellites around the world that are constantly sending hello messages, right? Saying, hello, how are you? Right? And they put a timestamp on those hello messages saying, hello, how are you? This is 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning, right? And your phone gets these hello messages from these different satellites, and the phone has its own clock. So the phone says, the message was sent at 10 o'clock. I received at 10:05. That means it took 5 minutes for the message to come to me, right? And distance is nothing but time multiplied by speed. And from that, you can compute a GPS receiver, your phone can compute how far this satellite is from this device. Okay?
Are those satellites frozen? And if they're
those satellites are moving.
Orbit, so they don't stay over one point?
Right. The satellites are moving all the time. So with respect to you, it is actually moving.
With the Earth?
With the Earth, yeah.
So they don't, relative to the Earth, they stay the same size?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, they are changing. Well, yes, sure. They're changing with relative to the Earth because their motion is not, the relative motion is not static. But you have a window of time when you can actually stay connected to a satellite before it actually goes down over the horizon, and then you move on to a different satellite.
How far from the Earth are they?
Approximately.
500 miles, 1 million miles?
Let me ask a GPS expert over there. How far? Huh? 20,000 kilometers. Wonderful. Okay. So that's how far they are. But you know, once you get the distance from your device to the GPS satellite, you really still don't know where you are, because you can be on a circle around that satellite. You can be on any point on that circle. Right? You just know the distance. Right? If I tell you you are 10 meters away from me, it doesn't tell you where you are. It just tells you you're on a circle around me. Right? So then, what can you do? Well, if you use another GPS satellite to tell you another circle around that GPS, and another one to tell you another circle, 3 circles would intersect. And from that, you can potentially pull out what your actual location looks like. Question? At any point, you can have multiple satellites, depending on how many satellites are moving around the Earth. Right? So you need at least 3 to compute your location. But remember, we said the GPS is saying 9 o'clock. Your clock says, oh, it's 9:05. That means the signal, the hello message must have traveled for 5 minutes. Well, that assumes your clock and the GPS's clock exactly moves in the same way. In reality, it does not. There's some difference. You might be in the central time zone. The GPS might be in the eastern time zone. And therefore, you also need to somehow understand what is the time difference between your clock and the GPS's clock. And you use that as another unknown, like your location. And you use a 4th GPS satellite to also solve for the unknown location and the unknown time difference. Okay? In reality, when your GPS device says locking onto satellite or searching for satellites, it's actually receiving these hello messages, figuring out the time, computing the location, and it needs at least 4, in general 6, to be safe, to finally figure out what that location is, and thereafter it's pretty cool.
Are the satellites circling all in the same direction so they don't crash into each other?
No, the satellites are all over, in different circles around the Earth, but they are programmed in a way that they don't crash into each other. Okay. Turns out, none of the GPS-based localization techniques that are so successful, none of that can be generalized or brought into indoor environments like our shopping mall, an airport, even our engineering buildings. Right? If you ask why, there are simple answers to that. One is these GPS signals do not go through roofs and buildings and walls very well. That's why if you turn on your GPS inside an indoor environment, your GPS is not going to be able to get a strong enough signal. Not only that, these signals, in this previous figure, we assume that the signal is traveling nicely in a straight line, so that you can say that the distance traveled by the signal is nothing but the speed of the signal, which is speed of light, times the time it took for the signal to travel. In indoor environments, these signals bounce around the walls and the ceilings and the chairs and our bodies a lot. As a result, the computation that distance is time difference times velocity, that no longer holds. This is also the reason why in a Chicago downtown or a New York downtown, GPS suddenly becomes erratic, simply because it has all these signals that are bouncing off the walls of these high-rise buildings, and thereby it can no longer, the calculation that the signal is coming directly from the GPS to the user is no longer true, and therefore GPS becomes not so precise. Okay? As a result of this, indoor environments lack the ability to use GPS, and then people started thinking, what can we do if we want to enable localization in indoor environments? Okay? And one of the thoughts was, hey, can Wi-Fi, we have lots of Wi-Fi access points around in this building, or any building today, can Wi-Fi be the indoor proxy to GPS? Okay? So the basic idea is actually very simple. What it started off around 1998, where Wi-Fi was still being researched. Wi-Fi was not a standard 1998. It was people were thinking about how to design this in-home internet, wireless internet system. But some people from Microsoft Research started thinking, oh, in addition to using Wi-Fi to connect to the internet, can we also use for other purposes, such as localization? Where I would say, hey, take me to the bathroom in this building, and my phone, my PD, or my device would actually give me a walking path to the bathroom. Okay? Good. So what was the idea? Their idea was very simple. They said, okay, there are multiple Wi-Fi access points. It's going to be like that in homes or in buildings. I am going to go to each location, or someone is going to go to each location in this building and figure out what is the strength of the signals that are coming from these different Wi-Fi access points at every location in the building. Okay, so I go to this chair, I measure, oh, this is the signal from that Wi-Fi is pretty strong, from this Wi-Fi is pretty weak, from that Wi-Fi is moderate. I go to the next location, I do the same measurement, and I create kind of a map of what the signal strengths look like from different Wi-Fi access points. Okay?
So what is the form of these signals?
Yeah. So Wi-Fi is transmitting data packets. Even when it's not, even when you're not in the internet, Wi-Fi is transmitting periodic packets to say, I am here, I am here. So when you get a packet, you get the strength of the signal, meaning if you're very far away from the Wi-Fi access point, the signal becomes weaker and weaker. This is also like your bars in your mobile phone screen, which says how strong the signal is. So if you're close to the Wi-Fi access point, it's a strong signal. You're far away, it's weak. And from that, you can say, oh, at this location x1, y1, from Wi-Fi access point 1, my signal was 65. From Wi-Fi access point 2, my signal was 50, and so on. So for every location, you have a bunch of numbers, which are the signal strengths.
Basically a radio signal, right?
Radio signals, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Why are the numbers negative?
Yeah, why are the numbers negative? Okay, so it turns out these signals, the numbers are compared to 1 milliwatt, which is a standard for expressing the strengths of signal, and negative 65 means it's less than 1 milliwatt. Okay, so it's less than some well understood norm, it's weaker than that. Okay? That's why it's minus 65. It's actually in dB, but you don't have to worry about it. This only says that it's less than some global standard. Wonderful? And this actually turned out reasonably good with around 5 to 8 meters of accuracy, meaning at every location, the signal strength that you overhear is different from maybe another location over here. Okay? And if you can create a map of that, then you can start doing indoor localization, and Google started actually doing some of this 10 to 12 years back. Right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. The question was, oh, I need many Wi-Fi access points in a building to be able to do that, because if I just have one Wi-Fi access point, it's like having one GPS satellite. I have some signal strength, but I don't know where I am. I am on a circle again around that Wi-Fi access point. Why? Because the signal strength will keep changing as I move away from the Wi-Fi access point. So knowing a signal strength gives me some understanding of distance, and knowing one distance tells me I'm in a circle around that Wi-Fi access point. Very good. Okay? So that was definitely one of the problems. And also 5 meters to 8 meters, people said, can we do better? Now the question is, why is it not perfect? Because when I sit at this chair, the signal strengths are some value. When I move to this chair, the signal strength changes. So if I know the signal strengths for every location, why should I not be able to pinpoint my accuracy and say you are sitting at this chair as opposed to you are in this 6-meter radius area? Right? Well, it turns out that these signals, again, like we talked about in GPS, bounce around a lot. Okay? So if this is a Wi-Fi access point in an office, and this is your laptop or your phone, when your phone transmits a signal, or the vice versa, when the Wi-Fi access point transmits a signal, there is one path that the signal takes that's directly from the access point to your phone, but there's a bunch of other paths which are reflections of the chair, the wall, the ceiling, your body, my head, the laptop. Even if I move my hand a little bit, these signal reflections change. And what you receive is actually a sum, an aggregate of all these reflected, bounced, scattered, diffracted signals. That's what you get. And now you can see, oh, it's not clear that this chair and this chair has unique signal strengths. And not only that, if I constantly move away from a Wi-Fi access point, it's not clear that the signal strength is going to keep going down. Why? Well, because maybe here, one of the bounced signals is not reaching me because there's some small divider or something that blocks that signal. But once I move back a little, that bounced signal comes to me and adds up to the direct path signal. And as a result, even if I'm far away, I can have a stronger signal strength. So you cannot say that weaker the signal strength, further away you are, stronger the signal strength, the closer you are. That's not necessarily true, because this bouncing starts happening. Okay? Now, at this point, some people started saying, hey, this bouncing is a very complex pattern. Can I start looking at these bouncing patterns to create a fingerprint or a signature for different locations? Right? So if at this location a signal bounces off that projector, and at this location that signal does not bounce off the projector anymore, maybe it bounces off that chair, then I can start looking at these properties, and can I start saying, oh, that's my new signature, as opposed to just strength of the signal. Okay? So if that has to hold, then two things have to hold. Okay? One, these channel signatures must be stable over time if you want to use that as a location signature. At this location, if the bouncing patterns keep changing, then what localization can you do? Because today you will say, oh, this pattern maps to this chair. Tomorrow the pattern at this chair would change. You cannot do localization. Right? So it has to be stable over time, but it's not going to be stable. We know that, because every time someone moves, the reflection patterns would change. It cannot be stable. So if it is not stable, well, at least the variations should have some pattern. Right? If the variations have some pattern, then also it's meaningful. Okay? The other thing that needs to hold is, well, this chair's signature or bouncing patterns should be very different from this chair's bouncing pattern. Otherwise, I cannot say which chair you are at. Make sense? So these two hypotheses need to hold. Okay? Good. So before we move on, let's ask, what is this channel signature? How do you even understand this channel? What is these bouncing and reflections? How do we get some handle? How do we model this in some way? And there's an easy way to understand this. Okay? Imagine time is flowing downwards. Okay? There's a Wi-Fi access point who's sending hello, and your mobile phone, your smartwatch, your laptop is getting this signal. Okay? I promise this is the most complicated things we'll get. After that, it's not going to be as complicated. Okay? So when the Wi-Fi access point sends the H of hello, the signal travels. Remember, this is time. So if this is 9 o'clock, the signal arrives at the smartphone at maybe 9:01. Actually, the signal takes a nanosecond to arrive. Right? I'm making it 9:01 just to make it easier for us to understand. I don't want to say 9 o'clock 1 nanosecond. Okay? So it arrives at the smartphone at 9:01, and the signal has degraded, has attenuated, has become weaker. So the signal is no longer 1H, it's 0.8H. Okay, it's become a little bit weaker. Okay? Now, the Wi-Fi access point sends E. This signal E also arrives as 0.8E, the same way, along the same path, but the reflected path of H gets reflected from the projector and arrives at me, that also arrives along with this E. Does that make sense? So what I get in the first time instant is H, or 0.8H, which is pretty good. But the next time instant, I get the sum of the delayed H and the direct E. But the sum is also sum weighted by some values. Right? So I'm not getting HELLO from the Wi-Fi access point. I'm getting 0.8H, and the next time I'm getting some combination of H and E, and the next time I'm getting some more combination of H, E, and L, because the H has another delayed path that's maybe bouncing off the projector, bouncing off the screen, and then coming to me. L is coming to me directly, E is now bouncing off the projector, L is now bouncing sorry, L is coming to me directly, E is bouncing off the projector, H is bouncing off the projector, the screen, and to me. And this keeps happening, and this is why it is not easy to look at what you're getting and immediately say, oh, this is what the transmitter must be transmitting. This operation is what is called convolution, meaning the room is taking your signal and mixing it up, taking each of the characters in your hello and mixing it up nicely by delaying and reflecting and bouncing these signals. And this is what you get, and from that, all your today's, when you browse your internet, the receiver somehow pulls out hello from all these data. Okay? But we do not care about internet and how it works, we care about location. So what we do is, we want to understand, oops, from this data, what did the room do to my signal? In other words, what are the bouncing properties of this room? Right? So actually it's not easy, not difficult to understand. If you see that the bouncing properties of the room is like when a hello is sent, there's one hello H that goes directly, one goes delayed, one goes a little bit more delayed, and the other goes very delayed. So one could look at how much the delays are for each of the bouncing signals and how much they've degraded or become weaker over time, and this is your room. This is what is called a channel impulse response. That's a much more difficult term. You can think of this as what your room does to your signal. And it doesn't matter whether you give H or E or L, L, O, whatever, the same room would take E and do the same thing to it. So if I can somehow pull this out of the signals that I receive, hey, this part is a function of where I'm standing. True? If I stand here, maybe this guy would come down a little bit, this would get more delayed, this would go up a little bit, and so on. So the channel is what is a signature, and we can express the channel as a bunch of numbers that capture the strength of the signal, or how the signal gets weaker and how the signals get delayed because of reflections. Questions? Okay? Once we know this, now we can start plotting this for different locations and see, is there a nice pattern for this? It turns out there's a pretty nice pattern. The patterns might change, but this is a case where this is the location for one chair, this is the location for the adjacent chair, and they are different because this thing that I showed you over here actually has many small values at different time gaps, and it's actually a pretty rich amount of data. Okay? Question?
Does the signal intensity depend on the temperature? Or the
Yeah, it does depend on the temperature, but those dependencies are very small. Right? The scale that the difference between this location and this location is much bigger than the difference between if the temperature changes by 5 degrees. Right. Okay? Question?
Is a different algorithm used for public safety wireless? Because broadband that allows for coordination of emergency responders and such in terms of their locations indoors?
So location indoors is still an open question. No one has good solutions which can be generally used in a general public place. In certain cases, there are firefighters and certain special forces deploy certain specific infrastructure to do localization, but there are very special cases that operate in very well understood environments and that do not generalize. Okay? But in those kind of cases, some of the fundamental principles of this decoding and channel still apply, but on a case-by-case basis, there might be variations. Okay, good. So with those channels, it was shown that each location has a different signature, and that allows pretty good localization where the accuracies can be around 1 to 2 meters, to the extent that it was deployed in a museum where you go in front of a painting, your phone shows information about that painting, you go to the next painting, the information changes because the phone knows from these bouncing signatures where you are exactly standing and can give you the information based on that. Make sense? That's the right question, and that's exactly my next slide. How do you create these patterns? Well, the room is creating the patterns for you, but you need to measure these patterns, right? So you need to measure these patterns in front of every painting. Otherwise, how do you know what the pattern is, right? Well, it turned out that people who did this, which is my past students, they took a laptop, they put it on a Roomba, and they made the Roomba go round and round for 5 minutes in front of every painting. Say that again. And clean the place at the same time, maybe. Right? And they did this for every painting. And by the way, they had to put these laser boxes because you can make a Roomba not go out of a box by putting a laser boundary. Okay? So the Roombas went round and round, collected all the combinations of HELLO, pulled out the signatures from it for every painting, and manually we said, oh, this signature corresponds to Mona Lisa, the next signature corresponds to Van Gogh, blah, blah, blah. And then when you walk, you as a museum visitor, you come to this location, your phone picks up the signature, compares against that table, and says, you are in front of Mona Lisa.
If there are 50 people in the room,
Right.
they're going to start creating a wild pattern.
Exactly. If there are 50 people in the room, these signatures are going to change, right? So robustness is not a good property of this idea, right? And not to talk about when we talked to Intel and Google about these, people said, oh, who is going to do that for you? Maybe museums because they don't have customers at night, but people like Walmart and shopping malls and other places which are always running, there's no way we are going to be able to tolerate this kind of fingerprinting.
In order to get the information about the painting, though, that person's going to have to stand in a relatively small area.
Right.
And so if there's a half dozen people standing there, they're going to get different channels.
That's going to be different. That's absolutely true, because half dozen people would actually bounce these signals in different ways. But part of the reason why you do not get better than 2 meters is because of that. If you really got the perfect channel, you should have been able to do 3 centimeters, because we saw that in an open room without any mobility, if you really get the channel, the granularity that you can get your location is at actually 2 to 3 centimeters. Because that's where the reflections change enough for it to be a different signature. But because of these all kinds of other factors happening in the environment, you can only do 1 to 2 meters. That's the reason, right? But the bigger reason is who's going to do this from a more technology perspective, okay? So that raised the question, can we eliminate fingerprinting altogether? And not only that, I think he was the one who asked, you need so much of these Wi-Fi infrastructure around you. What if the place does not have this, has only one Wi-Fi access point? What can you do? Okay? This was around 2005. Okay? And then people started thinking, what is there a way to do indoor localization in a completely different way? Okay? And here's the idea. And it is at this point, 2006, 2007, that smartphones started coming in. And interestingly, these phones had all kinds of sensors on them: accelerometers, compasses, gyroscope, proximity sensor, wireless radios, temperature sensors in some Nokia phones, all kinds of sensors on them. I remember talking to Nokia at that point. I said, what are you going to do with the sensors? He says, you tell me. And then said, well, I said, I have some ideas of what to do with the sensors. So, oh, here is 50 phones. Can you take them to your lab and do something with it? No one had a clue. The best thing they thought was, okay, maybe gaming would be where you would use it, where you would guide a racing car by moving the phone, right? Accelerometers, let me just quickly tell you, are sensors that actually measure force. If you hold the sensor like that, it will give you gravity. If you move the sensor like that, the signals would change that can give you the acceleration of the device that you are creating on the device. Okay? We have demos after this talk where you can actually take a look at these things. Okay? So anyway, there were these sensors that started coming in, and with these sensors, what you could start doing is the following. When you walk with the phone on your body, any part of the body, your body actually bounces. And that creates a signal like this on your accelerometer. And you know, your Fitbit essentially counts the number of peaks or the number of bounces in this signal and tells you how many steps you've walked. If you actually play ping pong with your Fitbit, that's the way to cheat it though. You just have to turn the Fitbit around a little bit because it knows orientation. It knows that you don't walk like that, you walk like this. But if you turn the Fitbit around and you do this, your actually step count is going to go off the charts. So if you're falling behind with your friends on the calorie count and the step count, you've learned at least something today. Okay? So you count your steps, and there is some result which says, you know, given your body mass and your height, you can figure out what the length of each step is. And from that, you can potentially start understanding which way you are walking. Of course, you have to do some more tricks around understanding which direction you're walking, but you can stitch those together and you can figure out which way, the path of your walking. And then you say, okay, if I know that path, if I know the initial location, which is, let's say, the entrance of the shopping mall, you have solved the problem. Not so easy. Turns out that when you look at these sensors over time, the sensors become more and more erroneous. Let me not get into that details, but those of you who want to quickly understand, acceleration to location is a double integration. You double integrate acceleration to get location. But if there's some acceleration error, that error goes larger and larger over time as you double integrate. And not only that, there's also issues about not knowing which reference frame you should double integrate in. Forget that if it did not make sense. But the point is, what your sensors give you is actually this orange path, which becomes different from your actual path as you go over time. Make sense? So the question is, you cannot really use it, just this alone, to do localization. What do you do? So then, you know, people started looking at what did other people do, because this idea of using these sensors to localize is called dead reckoning. This is in some sense like I put you in the trunk of a car, you're kidnapped, and I drive the car in weird ways, and then I bring you out of the trunk, and I say, okay, tell me where you are. You have to somehow think, I took a left turn, I took a right turn, right? In your mind, you don't know how the car is moving, you cannot see it, you're inside the trunk, but in your mind, you have to dead reckon how the car is going, and then come out and say, I must be at the university campus. It's a hard problem. But it turns out Charles Lindbergh landed a flight from New York to Paris without GPS, with using these compasses on his very old biplane, and used stars as kind of landmarks to get his fixes, and flew the plane in the right trajectory to land at the right spot. Okay? That was amazing, right? These stars served as the guidance to do it, and then we started asking, what if we have stars but in indoor environments? Which means if we have stars, let's say, which are landmarks, over here, 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 and so forth, we could start walking, deviate from the actual path, but the moment we hit a star, we set ourselves correct, we correct our course. Again, we hit a star, we correct our course, we hit a star, we correct our course. So if there's enough stars in the indoor environment that we know of, we can keep correcting our course, and the green line would be the line of our walking paths, which would be pretty good, because it's hugging the actual path that you're walking on. Right? What could these stars be? Turns out there's no stars indoors, not in the daytime for sure. So then people started looking, what could be these landmarks? And when you look at a place like this, an indoor building, an innocuous, naive place like this, there's no star in here, except when you start looking at it from the eyes and ears of the sensors in your device. When you start looking this at the same environment through what the sensors are looking at, right, then you see, there are patterns. there are very interesting patterns all around us that you and I are not conscious of, but it's there. For example, if you get into an elevator, when the elevator starts and stops, you gain weight and you lose weight, right? Your accelerometer shows a distinct pattern that says you're in the elevator. When you pass a water cooler, there are all kinds of stuff, magnetic stuff happening in the water cooler. And if your phone passes near it, your phone's magnetometer compass would fluctuate in a very unique way that only happens around the water cooler and not in other places. Turns out in our building there was a spot where if you walk through the spot, your phone call is going to drop. People get frustrated with that because that's a spot where the 3G, 4G signals are very bad. For us, it was great because that's another landmark. We can say whenever your signal actually fluctuates a lot, your cell tower signal, that's an indication of where you might be. So it turns out that these could be the stars that you're looking at. So whenever you see your magnetometer fluctuating in a particular way, you could say, I must be in front of the water cooler. I reset my location. It does not need any infrastructure. It's man-made infrastructure that's giving you patterns of sensor information. Okay? So it turned out that indoor environments had lots of stars, and it had been true across the board. And once you have those stars, you have your Lindbergh stars, and you can start estimating your path and doing indoor localization. But wait. The difference between Lindbergh and what I just told you is the following. Lindbergh knew the location of the stars because he had a map. Astronomy was all pretty developed by that time, so he knew that star should be there, that star should be here. We have no clue where the water cooler is in a shopping mall in Shanghai. Right? We don't know where these patterns are in an environment. Right? So the question is, what do you do then? And that's where this algorithm came up. It's called unsupervised indoor localization. And the idea of the algorithm is a little bit tricky, but I'll give you a very quick high-level idea, which is you use walking patterns to localize the landmarks. From the phone data, you see where are there interesting patterns happening. And from those patterns, you see if the person started walking from a particular location, you can localize the patterns from dead reckoning. But once you localize the landmark locations from dead reckoning, you can refine the human location. And then once you refine the human location, you can refine the walking patterns, and you can keep going in a recursion until the whole system converges. I know that was tricky, but the high-level idea was use the rough dead reckoning estimates to compute the location of the landmark, use the computed location of the landmark to improve the location of the user, and keep doing this. This will get better over time. Why? Oh, because you have data from multiple people who are walking, and these people have statistical independence in their errors, and when you add up these errors, the errors cancel nicely under certain statistical properties, and then you can actually start localizing where the human is.
Wondering why that sonar kind of technology not being used?
Sonar kind of technologies.
Something that bats easily use.
Right. That's the other point, right? Sound is also a good way of understanding where people are. I mean, submarines send out sound signals, look at their reflections, and figure out where the torpedo is, right? Sonar, sound. Why not do the same thing with Wi-Fi, right? That's exactly what we're going to talk about next, very soon. Just give us 3 more slides. Okay, good. So this happened. Localization was possible without any reliance on the infrastructure, on fingerprinting, nothing. And the error turned out to be around 1.6 meters, and no fingerprinting, nothing needed. And this actually is probably, Samsung is considering pushing some of this into Samsung phones that will come out in the future. Okay? So here's a quick demo of the thing running in our lab. Oops. So here is Katie actually walking this corridor down CSL. And as you can see, this is the phone view, the phone that she is holding. And as she walks, the dot on the map walks along with her when she crosses room number 246. The dot is pretty much in front of 246. And this happened without doing any fingerprinting whatsoever. You take the data from a few phones, you figure out where the landmarks are, and from the landmarks you can actually localize KT in real time. Okay? I'm happy to talk about this, but I want to move on quickly a little bit. Now, this kind of motion tracking using sensors carried on in many other threads of research. One being, can I wear a smart watch now and basically understand what I'm doing with my hands with applications such as in medical rehabilitation, in sports, where I want to know, did I throw the basketball exactly right or wrong? Right? Or maybe in gaming, in all kinds of gestures. And here is an example of just a quick result where this student is wearing a watch and he's writing A, B, C, D in the air. The watch figures out how the hand is moving, and the red one is Kinect, Microsoft Kinect's ground truth. The blue one is what the student's smartwatch is telling the student. And as you can see, they actually match pretty well, meaning there's more and more work that has happened on sensor-based motion tracking. To the extent that a recent project has shown that you can put tiny sensors in balls, baseballs, soccer balls, cricket balls, and these balls move extremely fast with extremely high speed, and even then you can start analyzing these motion patterns of the balls. Today, the way sports analytics happens is by putting $1 million cameras in a stadium and looking at the balls and trying to understand the motion of the balls. If you put small sensors in them that cost around $40, you can start doing your baseball pitch, and on your phone look at whether the ball was a curved ball or it dipped or it did the right thing that you wanted to do. You can enable all kinds of motion tracking technology. These are also some of the stuff that are going into drones. Okay? Let me move on from there to something that's, I think running badly late on time. But I want to quickly talk about at least this part, which is device-free sensing. People said, okay, all that I talked to you all this while was where you had a device in your hand or you're wearing a device. Why do I need to do that? Can I get rid of the device and still do localization, motion tracking, gesture recognition? Okay? The idea being my Wi-Fi device is sending out signals. The signal bounces off my body, off my hand, off my fingers, and bounces back. Can the same device look at the reflections and from that tell where you are, what you're doing? Okay? Should be possible. And this is the initial thought came out from a challenge paper that came out in the community. Can you do device-free localization? And the first attempt at that was something like this, where you've seen these laser security, right? That there's to protect the diamond, there's a layer of lasers, and you have to really go through the lasers to be not able to trigger the alarm. People did that with Wi-Fi kind of devices as well, where they put a whole bunch of wireless transmitters receivers that created like these invisible laser-like links. And then as you walk through this, you're essentially cutting different links. And by looking at which links you're cutting, you're able to say that the user is actually at the left bottom corner of the box. That was the first attempt at saying device-free motion tracking. Okay? But then this was done by some folks from Utah, and it was actually gaining popularity when another group from MIT, they came and said, hey, can I use a cell phone or your Wi-Fi device to not only figure out the location, I also want to image the guy who's on the other side of the wall. Okay? So there's someone walking on the corridor on the other side of this room. I want to take my phone. I want to send some wireless signals. The signals would reflect off the wall. The signals would reflect off that person. I'll get that reflection. And I'd say, there is John walking down that corridor. Right? Can you do that? Okay? So again, it goes back to that same reflection property. Reflection is nothing but a mixture of things. And the whole science is about how do you disentangle these mixtures. Okay? So here's the idea. The key idea is the following. The phone would sense a signal that would hit the human, reflect back, and it will become weaker and weaker by the time it comes back. But of course, the wall is also going to reflect back the signal, and that wall's reflection is going to be much stronger than the human's reflection, because the signal has traveled much more reflected from the human body, which absorbs some of these signals. Human body is a lot of water. So to absorb some of these signals and then reflects back, so it's not easy to actually say which is that signal in this jumbled up mixture that came from the body of the human. That's the goal that I have. But I have a mixture of various other things. Okay? Now, if you could do this, there's a bunch of applications. The military would be very happy. Firefighters would be happy to know who is behind the wall. Gaming, security, all kinds of things can open up. Right? The question is, how can we eliminate the reflection of the wall and just only pull out the reflection of the human finger? Okay, good. So the idea is very simple. The idea is, let's transmit two waves that cancel each other when they reflect off the static objects but not the moving object. Okay, here's the idea. I'm going to send a signal, and the signal is going to reflect in all kinds of on all kinds of objects and come back to me. Agreed? That signal is going to have some pattern. I'm going to send another signal which is the opposite of that. That is going to reflect in a similar way, come back, but I can change that signal in a way that it will cancel all the signals that's coming back to me on the first receiver. Okay? So here's the idea. I have 3 antennas. If you don't want to think about antennas, think of 3 speakers for sound. This applies to sound and to wireless. I have 3 antennas. These 2 are transmit antennas, and this is a receive antenna. I'm going to send a signal, X, hello, from the transmit antenna, and the transmit signal is going to come back after some reflection at this receiver antenna. This signal, I'm going to change the hello with some other distortion. That signal is also going to come back with some reflection from the wall. But I'm going to design this distortion in a way that when they add up, this y, which is the received signal, which is the reflected signal x, and the reflected signal of alpha x, when they add up, they become 0. How can I make it 0? Well, if I make alpha minus of h2 divided, or minus of h1 divided by h2, alpha is minus h1 divided by h2. You plug alpha over here, minus h1 divided by h2, h2 cancels, minus h1x. Those 2 cancel out. Right? By designing the signals, I get nothing in terms of reflection, except if you move, that's the part that's not going to cancel out. Right? That makes sense, right? The furniture, the couch, the coffee table, all the reflections will cancel, except when you are moving, that reflection won't cancel, and that's my opportunity. Okay? So that's what it does. When people move, it does not cancel, and I can look at the residue at the receive antenna, and from the residue I can say, aha, this is a manifestation of the movement that I'm seeing. Well, how do I track? I can see movement, that someone's moving. Can I track exactly where that person is going? Well, it turns out, I want a little bit of detail here. It turns out there are techniques in signal processing where if you have an antenna array, you can get the signals at that array, and from that figure out how the person is moving, because the motion influences the signals that you get at each of these antennas. But you can turn this around and say, if I have only one antenna, but the person is moving, it's as if it's the same thing, just reverse. So it's as if this is a virtual array of antennas like this one. Okay? So you can again do signal processing tricks to actually be able to say which way is this guy moving, because the way that guy will move will influence what the delays of the signals are that reflect from that guy. Make sense? Good. So then we can start doing that, and here is a demo of this idea. You take this device which sends out the signal and you put it behind the wall, and now this guy walks into the room and the signal that the device sees is this following signal, where as he moves away or close to the wireless device, the signal changes. The ambient, the reflections from the furniture and the stuff are all cancelled out. Only his motions show up in the wireless signal. Okay? And here's another demo where he's walking around, the wireless transmitter is behind the wall, and as he moves, that wireless transmitter, like your sonar, but it's just that it's doing over wireless now, figures out how he's moving, and you can do localization with that. So this is like see-through wall, and these guys took it further and said, hey, your body, your hand, your chest, your legs are also reflecting these signals in different ways. They started imaging the actual body behind the wall, almost like X-ray vision, just by looking at the reflections of the signals. Okay? Can we push this further? If you're going to track motion with reflections, how far can you go? Turns out you can even do something more. If you're breathing, your chest is kind of inhaling and exhaling. There is movement. When the signal is hitting your chest and bouncing, right? The signal, the time that it would take for the signal to hit the chest and go back would depend on whether you're inhaled or exhaled. So what if we could do this? The signal hits you, comes back, you know some time of that signal, or at least you know the phase, which is in some form of a delay of the signal. But then once you start inhaling and exhaling, when you inhale, the distance between the transmitter and your chest surface actually changes. So if you could pull out that difference, then I can start monitoring your breathing. The smart home or the Wi-Fi router in your smart home can figure out when your breathing is changing and maybe do certain things with it. That might be crazy in terms of privacy, but in terms of health monitoring, old age health monitoring, etc., it might be actually a very useful idea. Okay? So you try to understand what is the change of phase being delay, when you're in your reflections, and from that you pull out the breathing patterns. And not only that, maybe your heartbeat. Okay? So here is a demo where this guy is actually breathing, and this is the signal that's being generated from the wireless reflection, and the signal is going up and down based on how he's breathing. And if you zoom in into these signals, this is the inhale, the lower peaks. This is the exhale, the higher peaks. And guess what these small variations are? Those are the heartbeats. Your heartbeat are like minor variations that modulating your breathing signal. And if you zoom in and start analyzing those blips or those jittery signals, you start understanding what kind of heart rate you have. And here's the final demo on this I'll show you, where a baby is sleeping. It doesn't look like the baby is doing much. It looks like almost like a picture. But the clock is ticking, and you'll soon see that the heart rate monitor comes up, which actually matches very well with the ECG monitor. Okay? So this is the 126 heart rate, and this is the breathing pattern. Babies have a much higher heart rate, which is why it's that high. And this actually compares reasonably well with today's medical grade in devices in hospitals. Question? Because everything we are looking at is relative, and it's the relative pattern change that we are looking at. So the frequency of that remains the same from whichever angle you look.
To get the heart rate a little better, can you cancel out the breathing and just see the?
Yeah, that's exactly what's going on right now in the labs. Mm-hmm. Can you cancel out the breathing and then look at, zoom in into those fine-grained variations and do it. And now, people are throwing machine learning at the problem, where people are showing that when you're sleeping, you go through different stages of sleep. That changes your heart rates in different ways. And by your wireless access point can say, you were in deep sleep for this much, you tossed and turned for this much, you were in REM sleep for this much, and so forth. That is also turning out to be close to medical devices where if you do sleep apnea test, you have to put all kinds of sensors all around your body and then sleep. You don't sleep because of the test, not because you have sleep apnea. Question? I saw a question.
Should we be worried about all these Wi-Fi signals going to our bodies?
There's a lot of debate about that, but the common answer is electrical signals are also electromagnetic fields that have been around us for so many years. So it's not a big difference, and these signals attenuate pretty fast. And I mean, there's debate. I cannot give you a conclusive answer, but the point is electrical signals are also around you, so maybe it's not that bad a thing. Okay, I don't know how much time I have. Whoa. I got done with 2/5. Okay, I'm going to just tell you this inaudible acoustics and then maybe jump to, I have one slide for each. Do you want to stay back for 5-7 more minutes? Sure. Okay, thank you. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to change gear to something completely different, okay, because we've had enough of motion tracking and wireless and scary breathing pattern detectors. Acoustics is another dimension in which lots of exciting stuff's happening, right? Amazon Echo and Google Home, they're already in our houses. 50 million of them have been already sold. And the projections, if you look at it, are absolutely staggering. Okay? But this is only the tip of the iceberg, because there are lots of other stuff happening around acoustics. Qualcomm is coming up with earphones that will not only be wireless, it will have noise cancellation. Neura is a startup which is saying, look, I want to give you music that is personalized to you. How? Well, it has a wireless signal transmitter inside your earphone, which sends a signal and looks at the reflection to understand the anatomy of your ear canal. Reflections, right? So the way the signals reflect in your canal and add up to your eardrum determines how you would listen to the music. So if someone can understand how these reflections are happening in your anatomical structure, I can precisely do graphic equalization on the music to precisely boost up signals for frequencies at which you might be a little deaf, or for other frequencies in which you are too sensitive. This is the earphone that's coming out in the future. Google is coming up with ultrasound-based gesture recognition. Today you change your smartwatch's time by tapping onto it, doing scrolling, all kinds of nasty business. We call it nasty these days, right? Well, Google's idea is there's going to be a signal that's going to come out of the smartwatch, and you're going to basically do hand gestures, finger gestures, and change the time of your watch by doing moving your fingers like that. That's what's going to happen. Johnson & Johnson's come up with a patch which senses the vibrations and sounds in your body and bringing up new biomarkers that tells you what's going on. This is the best product of CES this year, which is the Consumer Electronics Show, which says that you wear this when you're sleeping, and it sends out carefully designed neurological sounds. It seems the brain responds to certain kinds of sounds, which become signals inside, and that makes your sleeping quality hugely better. I don't believe in many of these, but if it's the best product in CES, some people got hoodwinked. Right? Must be, right? No, I'm joking, I'm being over skeptical, but there is something to it that's interesting. This is my favorite, where new kind of speakers are coming in that will be laser beam. So for a person like me, where whenever I turn on the TV, my kids also jump up from their homeworks, I want the TV to be on, and only I listen to the TV while my kids, hopefully, would do the homework. That's a pipe dream. Even if that laser beam works, that my dream is not going to happen. But the point is, you can design these kind of laser beam speakers, which is beautiful, because you can exactly say, people standing at this location, please move off. Or you can make acoustic QR codes, where you have a QR code on a poster, You stand in front of it. You don't have to scan the QR code. You just listen to what is being said about that poster, right? With all these directional acoustic communication. Okay? Our group, we've been working on something a little bit different over here, which is also another Lego block, and we call this inaudible acoustics. And I want to quickly give you the intuition. Inaudible acoustics, yeah. So you know, normal sound is less than 24 kilohertz. That's the frequency. What is the frequency? If you take a sinusoidal wave, the faster the wave, the higher is the frequency. The slower is the wave, the lower is the frequency. If this wave goes more than 24,000 or more than 16,000 times per second, we don't hear that signal anymore. But if the waves goes 1,000 times per second, you'll actually hear that signal as T. Okay? If it's 2,000, it'll be T. The pitch and the frequency of that signal will go up. You'll hear a different signal. And if you look at my signal that's coming out of my voice, it's actually composed of a bunch of frequencies between 0 to around 10 kilohertz, or maybe not even 10, 8 kilohertz. Okay? This is a sound that we hear and all microphones hear. Okay? Now there's another sound called ultrasound, which is a sound which is above 25 kilohertz that we don't hear and even microphones don't hear, because microphones have been designed to listen to humans. Who else will they listen to? Right? So 25 and plus kilohertz, none of these guys hear it. This is called ultrasound. What we've been trying to do is design ultrasound that will not be audible to humans, naturally, but will be completely audible to all microphones. And I'm not even going to touch that microphone. It's your microphone. I'm going to play a sound that's ultrasound. You and I don't hear, but your microphone hears it. Okay? So imagine this is why we call it inaudible acoustics. So what can you do with it? If suppose you have this, right? Oh, well, there are multiple things you can do. One, if you and I want to have a private conversation, and we don't want any spy microphone around, maybe you and I don't care about that, but maybe military cares about that. I can put this box between us, which will send out this sound. You and I will talk, it will not interfere with us, but all spy microphones around will get jammed. Okay? If there's a concert where someone is illegally recording the music and I don't want them to record, I'll send this inaudible signal that you as a concert audience won't hear, but any microphone that tries to get it will actually get watermarked. You know what watermarked is, right? There are these pictures that are watermarked with certain things. You can watermark a music signal with this inaudible acoustic. But the more interesting part is people with bad intentions can also use this, where I can send a signal to your Amazon Alexa, to your Amazon Echo or your Google Home and say, Alexa, open the garage door. Whoa. You being inside the house, you're not going to be able to hear it, but your Alexa will respond as if it's exactly a voice command coming from a human being, and open your garage door. If I'm not that bad a guy, if I just want to play a practical joke on you, I'm going to say, Alexa, set up an alarm for 3 a.m. and I'm going to walk away. Right? Imagine a person who comes to your neighborhood, starts sending out these voice commands from his parked car, and all these Alexas go crazy and do things for you. And as you get more and more smarter homes and connected homes, maybe these devices will do all kinds of crazy things, opens up things for attack. Another attack is people who are wearing hearing aids might actually start hearing these sounds. A robber can go into a bank, start a transmission of this inaudible sound. All phone calls will get jammed, because if you turn on a phone call, the microphone is on, the microphone will get jammed, and then the robbery starts. Okay? So there are all kinds of applications, and in security we say if you want to secure a system, break it first. That's the best way to actually do it. So we've started looking at these kind of things, and this is a video that I want to show you, where what will happen in the video is one of my students would actually say a voice command to Alexa. Alexa is going to respond like a real human voice command. But then the speaker is going to say the same question to Alexa. You and I will not hear that sound, but Alexa will respond as if it's the same user who's asking that question.
Alexa, what's the capital city of the United States?
The United States capital city is Washington, D.C.
And now we're asking the same question from the laptop to the speaker.
The United States capital city is Washington, D.C.
I hope you did not hear that, right? I hope you did not hear the signal. In fact, you know, when we were video recording this, we had a very tough time. Tell me why. Because my video recorder's microphone was also listening to this sound. And then what's the point of having a video, right? Because for the video, you can also hear this guy saying, Alexa, what is the capital city of the United States? So what did we do? Well, it turns out that this high-frequency ultrasound attenuates quicker. So if I am sending a signal, which is low frequency and the high frequency sound will die down faster. So we stood in a location where the high frequency sound is not audible, but the low frequency regular voice is audible, zoomed in with our camera lens and did this video recording. Okay? Just because every microphone would pick up this sound.
Oh, okay, so Alexa doesn't have a standard microphone.
Say that again. This one?
Yeah.
This one has multiple microphones that actually pick up the sound. Yeah.
Is that a special one? That's not
No. We have a demo of a regular Alexa. After this talk, you can actually come over and start asking questions. And you can ask any question by typing in that question. The speaker will send the question. You will not hear it, and Alexa will respond. Okay? You can play around with this after the talk. Okay? Question is, how do we do this? 5 more minutes. Okay. It's not my fault. Okay, so I'll quickly tell you what we do over here. Okay, you have to understand a microphone first to be able to understand what's going on. A microphone is nothing but a paper which vibrates when air hits that paper. Then there's an amplifier which magnifies the signal. Then there's a filter which says anything above 24 kilohertz, I don't care. And then there's a ADC, analog to digital converter, which gives me digital signals. Okay, actually to cut a long story short, what really happens is this. I want to summarize this very quickly. Okay, so typically when a signal comes into a microphone, when the signal gets amplified, the microphone's hardware behaves linearly, meaning an input signal V in, a voltage, gets magnified by a constant factor, say A1. So the output V out is A1 times V in. Agreed? So if the V in is 10 volts, the output is 20 volts because A1 is 2. That's what you do. But this is true only for a particular set of frequencies. If you give a higher frequency to that same amplifier, it will no longer behave in this manner. It will behave in this weird way where it's A1 V in plus A2 V in square plus A3 V in cube and so on. This is called nonlinear behavior. Okay? The point is, this V in square allows me to play with the signal. I can send a carefully designed high frequency signal that will go into V in square, and thereby, actually let me just tell you the math very quickly. If you send a signal sine f1 plus sine f2, and that gets squared, this signal, if you do trigonometry, will turn out to be cos 2f1, 2f2, f1 plus f2, f1 minus f2. These frequencies are all high frequencies. So they'll get filtered out. But f1 minus f2 is actually a low frequency that will come and sit within that 24 kilohertz range that you are capable of hearing, or your microphone is capable of recording. So if I design this signal carefully, I can do all kinds of things. And now the signal need not be just a sine signal. Whatever signal I put in there, I can make that signal move into my audibility range. And that can enable acoustic communication. There can be a Wi-Fi kind of device which gives you internet connectivity, but through acoustics. There can be all kinds of other applications that we talked about, and that's where inaudible acoustic comes in. Let me just wrap up with the last slide maybe. People are interested in the battery-free communication part, I hear. I want to give you a quick one-slide snapshot of what else is happening around the smart city area. 5G is a big deal. Right? You're hearing about 5G a lot, which is the next level of cellular communication. Well, the big deal about 5G is two things that you need to understand. One, these things are at very high frequencies. Wi-Fi operates at 2.5 gigahertz. 5G would operate at 60 gigahertz. And because of that, the communication is going to be extremely directional, which means your Wi-Fi access point today, when it sends a signal, the signal goes everywhere. 5G, when it sends a signal, the signal will be laser-like, 10 degrees beams. Hey, that's great, right? Because one cell tower can talk to this car or this person, and a nearby cell tower can talk to another person, and these two signals would not interfere. Great. But the problem is, to be able to talk to the car also needs to point its beam towards you. Make sense? So the problem is the following that a lot of researchers are struggling with. Imagine this is a dark room, and we all have flashlights that are very narrow. And now I say, John, you talk to Susan. The first problem is in the dark you have to find where Susan is. Right? Susan has to also point towards you. And you cannot say, hey, Susan, I'm here. You cannot say that. Everything you have to say is through the spotlight or through the flashlight. So the first problem is, how do you make these two beams line up where you can only communicate through that beam, but also only coordinate through that beam? You cannot coordinate by saying, hey, I am actually towards the right side of the room. You cannot call him, call her and say that. You have to say everything through that beams. That's a major problem. And if you move a little, you've moved out of my beam, so I need to be constantly able to track you with these laser-sharp beams. That's the hard question that's being looked at. Another vision that's kind of brewing in labs is, can tomorrow's cell towers be mounted on drones? Or on self-driving cars? So network infrastructure, when we think about it, we think of cellular towers, Wi-Fi access points, speakers, projectors. They're all static. Mobile users are like us who are moving around. But how about we start injecting mobility into infrastructure as well, where the cell tower flies to your building because your coverage is pretty weak, or you want your Skype video to be perfect. Can a car come and park nearby so that you actually get great coverage and connectivity? Another quick one I want to tell you is your airport security is likely to get revolutionized, where today you cannot carry liquids through airport security because there's no way for security to understand what that liquid is without dipping a probe into that liquid. And they don't want to dip that probe, so they say no liquids. There's been work which is saying, I'll transmit a signal, that signal will go through the liquid, and by looking at how the signal changed through that liquid, I'll understand the refractive index of the liquid. From that, I'll get the permittivity of the liquid, and from that, I'll say what liquid is this. And there are results which says you can differentiate between Diet Coke and Diet Pepsi, green tea and black tea, mineral water and tap water, which has other applications, like you can build a straw, you dip the straw in water, the straw tells you this is not a good water to drink. The last slide I want to tell you is what is called battery-free communication, where people are saying, I want two devices to communicate to each other without any battery. And how am I going to do that? Well, this device is getting some cellular signals. Cellular signals are everywhere, or Wi-Fi signals are everywhere. But I'll reflect this cellular signal in a way that encodes information. Right? So suppose I have the ability to reflect this signal by either making the signal opposite to it. A signal is coming. I have the ability to either leave it as it is or making it the opposite. So if I want to send you a 1, I leave it as it is. If I want to send you a 0, I make it opposite. And now you can see the signal reflects and comes to you. I can change this signal without a battery. All I need to do is utilize the energy in the signal itself to get that little bit power which is only necessary to make the signal opposite. And people are looking at cameras, surveillance cameras or your home cameras without a battery that will send you video feeds. It won't be the same quality as your regular video feed. It's going to be a black and white video feed. But it's a video feed nonetheless from a camera which is outside your house door, which has no battery whatsoever. Okay? Let me finish up. There are lots of building blocks being looked at in various labs, research labs and universities and companies across the world. These are like Lego blocks. And they are funneling in. Industry startup is coming in and putting these Lego blocks together in very interesting ways to ultimately create beautiful Lego structures. If you think about what goes on in these universities, it's mostly these Lego blocks. But also sometimes industry comes and says, I want to build this new structure, and I need a new kind of Lego block for it. And they go back to the university, and the university starts building these Lego blocks. Right? So there's a convergence of sensing, computing, communications, and control that's coming together in this day and age and enabling all kinds of new futures that I hope you would see in the next 10 years. Okay? Thank you very much. These are all my collaborators and students. All of the good stuff I owe to them. Thank you very much for coming in and staying back this late. Thanks.